NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and NBC News legal analyst Misty Marris join me now with the latest on this case. Aaron and Misty, good morning to both of you. Aaron, we'll start with you. This is the first case of its kind in Georgia, with prosecutors trying to hold a parent accountable for their child's alleged violence. What all did we hear in the opening statements yesterday?
Well, Joe, we heard from several witnesses yesterday who really helped the prosecution lay out what happened on the day of this shooting, both before the shooting, during, and after. We heard from teachers, law enforcement, even one parent on the stand yesterday. But you're right, this prosecution is really focused on the father, Colin Gray, and what he did or didn't do in the weeks and months leading up to, and years, as a matter of fact, leading up to this shooting. We heard the prosecution in the opening statements argue that the father should have known that his son was a risk, that he was negligent in not taking action and he disregarded the risk that his son posed because he was aware that his son had exhibited signs of anger and violence and anxiety, that he had been cutting himself, that he had destroyed property. All these things, the prosecution says, were signs that the father should have known not to give his son a rifle. And even pointed to a text message in the weeks before the shooting at that school, Appalachian High School, that Colt Gray wrote to his father. The message said, "Whenever something happens, just know the blood is on your hands." Now, the defense in this case is working to establish that reasonable doubt that we know has to exist in order for an acquittal in a case like this. I want you to hear part of what the defense attorney said in his opening statements about Colt Gray, the son. Listen.
The evidence will show a teenager who is struggling mentally, a teenager who is deceptive, a teenager who hid his true intentions from everyone, from his family, from his counselor, from his siblings, from DFACS, from law enforcement, and most especially from his father.
So the defense is laying the responsibility for this school shooting squarely at the feet of the son, the accused shooter in this case, Joe. And I think you're going to hear the defense over and over again try to present the father as someone who did not know specifically about a plan to carry out a school shooting, Joe.
So, Aaron, I mean, the shooting happened more than 17 months ago, and the son, Colt Gray, is still awaiting his own trial. He'll be tried as an adult for 4 counts of felony murder. Why is his father's trial happening first?
There really hasn't been a thorough explanation of that. We know that Colt Gray, the son, got a new attorney at the end of last year, and that attorney has indicated that there's some mental health evaluations that have yet to be completed. And so here we are more than a year and a half later, and Colt Gray is still awaiting trial. There's been some talk about potentially him pleading guilty to some offense, but that is something that is still in the offing as we wait for a trial date here, Joe. And I think it's worth pointing out that the father in this case is facing that second-degree murder charge, which is fairly unique in Georgia in that it only applies when a child has been killed, according to the law, as a result of cruelty to children, or in this case, criminal negligence. Joe?
Misty, let's bring you in here. So Colin faces up to 180 years in prison if he's found guilty on the charges against him. As we mentioned, this is fairly new legal ground nationally, totally new ground in Georgia. What does the prosecution have to prove here to try and get a guilty verdict?
Yeah, so as Aaron laid out, this is a unique second-degree murder statute that says a death occurred during an act of child cruelty, and that requires what's called a reckless disregard standard. So what prosecutors have to prove is before this shooting occurred, there were significant warning signs that he essentially completely ignored and created this risk to the school and the children that were both killed and injured in that school. So it's a unique statute, and it's all about what he knew before. And what you're going to see the defense focus on is, jury, you can't look at this in retrospect. Now that this has happened, okay, there were warning signs. It's what he knew before and whether or not there was this significant risk that he disregarded.
We can't help but think of 2024, Jennifer and James Crumbley. They were the first parents to be convicted of manslaughter in a school shooting. This one happened in Michigan in 2021. Are there differences or similarities between the Crumbley's cases and this one here in Georgia?
Yeah, so I covered the Crumbley cases. I watched them both all the way through. And what's significantly different here is the severity of the charges. These are second-degree murder charges that we have here in Georgia, as opposed to manslaughter, which carry a penalty of up to 15 years. So the charges here are significantly more severe. Keep in mind, these are different jurisdictions, so the law is a bit different, but there are some similarities. For instance, there were no storage laws in Michigan like there are not here in Georgia. Also, we're looking at that same time frame before the shooting occurred. What was known by the parents, and did they disregard what would be a known risk?
I'm curious, in the case here in Georgia, the fact that the son has not had his case yet or been convicted, does that make it harder for the case with the father?
Yeah, so this is actually a major difference also between the Crumbley case. Ethan Crumbley had already pled guilty in that case. So here we have another issue, that there has not actually been a disposition as far as the shooter.
All right, Misty and Aaron, appreciate both of you joining us. Thank you so much.